offered her a marriage that was only a signature. She signed, and he could not stop smiling. The signature was the thing he said it would be, ink on paper, her name next to his name on a form filed at the county courthouse in Garnett, Montana Territory, the form that said they were married, and the married meaning nothing, except what the form said it meant, which was legal union. And legal union was the thing Nettie Walsh needed, because legal union was the only thing that could save her brother's land claim. The land claim was 160 acres of good grassland in the Deer Lodge Valley, filed by Nettie's brother Owen Walsh, who had homesteaded the land 3 years earlier, and who had died of a fever in April, and the dying had created a problem. The problem was the Homestead Act, which required 5 years of continuous residence to prove up a claim. And Owen had completed 3 years, and the remaining 2 years needed to be completed by a family member, or the claim would revert to the government, and the government would sell it, and the selling would be to someone who was not a Walsh, and the not being a Walsh was the loss, because the land was the only thing Owen had left behind, and the only thing that said he had existed, and Nettie was not willing to let his existence be erased by 2 years of unfiled residence. She was 27 years old. She was Owen's sister and his only surviving family. Their parents had died in Ohio, years apart, the mother to influenza and the father to the grief that follows influenza when the influenza takes the person you love, and the only surviving was the weight. Because being the last Walsh meant being responsible for everything the Walshes had built, which was not much in material terms, but was significant in the terms that matter, which are the terms of effort and sacrifice, and the stubborn insistence on continuing. The problem was the law. The law said a single woman could not hold a homestead claim unless she was the head of a household, and a head of household required either children or a husband, and Nettie had neither, and the neither was the obstacle, and the obstacle was legal, and the legalness made it immovable by any force except the force of compliance. And compliance required a husband, and a husband required a marriage, and a marriage required a man willing to marry a woman he did not know, for reasons that were entirely legal and not at all romantic. Palmer Goss was 39 years old, and he was the kind of man who solved problems. Not his own problems. His own problems were simple. The problems of a man who ran a sawmill on the Blackfoot River, and who lived alone in a cabin he had built with his own hands, and whose loneliness was not a problem, but a condition, the way altitude is a condition. You adapt to it, you function in it, you do not fix it, because fixing it would require changing the altitude, and changing the altitude would require moving, and Palmer did not want to move. His days had a rhythm that was as regular as the river current. Wake before dawn, start the boiler, feed the saw, watch the blade eat its way through pine and fir and larch, stack the lumber, sweep the sawdust, bank the fire, sleep. The rhythm was a comfort the way walls are a comfort. It kept the weather out, and the weather was loneliness. And loneliness was the climate of a man who had chosen solitude, not because he preferred it, but because the alternative required a kind of reaching that Palmer had never learned, the reaching toward another person that some people do instinctively, and that Palmer did only when the reaching was practical, when the reaching was a hand extended to help someone carry a beam or lift a gate. He solved other people's problems. He solved them the way he milled lumber, by looking at the raw material and seeing the thing it could become, and then cutting and shaping until the becoming happened. He had built houses for 3 families in the valley. He had bridged a creek for a rancher whose cattle could not cross during spring runoff. He had repaired the church roof after a storm, refusing payment, because the refusing payment was the kind of solving that does not require commerce, only competence and willingness, and Palmer had both. He heard about Nettie's problem from the clerk at the land office, who mentioned it the way clerks mention things, casually, without investment, the way a person drops a stone into a pond without watching for the ripples. The ripples reached Palmer at the sawmill the next day, carried by the postmaster, who carried all information in the valley, because the postmaster is the circulatory system of a small community, pumping facts and gossip and news through the body of the town the way a heart pumps blood. The postmaster said, "Walsh's sister is going to lose that claim. 60 days. No husband, no household, no claim, shame. Owen worked that land hard. The postmaster said it the way a person reports weather, factual, resigned, expecting no response except acknowledgement. Palmer did not acknowledge. Palmer thought. The thinking lasted the rest of the day, through the afternoon's milling and the evening's supper and the night's silence. The silence that was the space in which Palmer's thinking happened. The space that was usually empty, and that was now full of a woman he had never met, and a problem he had not been asked to solve, and the particular compulsion that seized Palmer whenever a problem presented itself, which was the compulsion to act, not to discuss, not to consider, not to weigh options, but to act, because action was the language Palmer spoke, and speaking was the thing Palmer did when words were inadequate, which was always. Palmer went to see Nettie at Owen's homestead, the homestead that would become Nettie's homestead if the law could be satisfied, the law that required a husband, the husband that Nettie did not have. He rode out on a Saturday morning in May, through the valley that was green with spring grass, and bright with the particular light of Montana in May, which is a light that makes everything look possible, even the impossible things. Nettie was at the well. She was drawing water, the bucket heavy, and the rope rough, and the drawing an effort that showed in her shoulders and her arms. And Palmer saw the effort the way he saw lumber, as raw material, as something that could be shaped into something better, and the better was the reason he had come. "My name is Palmer Goss," he said. "I run the sawmill on the Blackfoot. I understand you need a husband to hold this claim. I am offering to be that husband. The marriage would be a signature, my name next to yours on a form. The signature is the thing that satisfies the law. The law does not require love. The law requires names on paper. I am offering my name." Nettie set the bucket on the well coping. She looked at Palmer the way she looked at everything, directly, without evasion, with the assessment of a woman who has crossed a continent to save a dead brother's land, and who does not have the luxury of delicacy, because delicacy is the privilege of people who have time. And Nettie Walsh did not have time. She had arrived in Montana 6 weeks after Owen's death, traveling by rail to Helena, and then by stage to Garnet, and then by borrowed horse to the homestead, the traveling a grief in motion, because grief that moves is easier to carry than grief that sits still. And sitting still was the thing Nettie could not do, because sitting still meant thinking about Owen, and thinking about Owen meant remembering that he was 24 years old, and that 24 years old is too young to die of a fever on a homestead in Montana, and that the dying was senseless, the way all dying is senseless, but especially senseless when the person who dies is the last person you have. The land office had given her 60 days to prove eligibility or forfeit the claim, and 60 days was the deadline. And deadlines do not accommodate delicacy. "What do you want in return?" Nettie said. "I want nothing in return. I want the land to stay in your family. I want Owen's 3 years of work to amount to something. I want the law to be satisfied because the law requires satisfaction, and satisfying the law is not a sacrifice. It is a solution, and solutions are the thing I do. You do not know me. I know that you came from Ohio to Montana to save your brother's land. I know that a person who crosses a continent for a dead brother's land is a person whose loyalty is worth something. I know that loyalty is the quality I respect most, because loyalty is rare, and rare things deserve preservation, and the preservation is the marriage, and the marriage is the signature." They married on a Tuesday. The marriage was performed at the courthouse by the county clerk, who doubled as a justice of the peace, and the performing was brief and functional and legal, the way all courthouse marriages are brief and functional and legal. No flowers, no music, no witnesses except the clerk's assistant, who signed the form and went back to filing papers. Palmer signed. Nettie signed. The signatures were on the paper, and the paper was filed, and the filing was the satisfaction of the law, and the satisfaction was the thing that saved Owen's land, and the saving was the purpose, and the purpose was complete. Palmer could not stop smiling. The smiling was involuntary, the way breathing is involuntary, the body doing a thing the mind had not authorized, the face producing an expression that the occasion did not warrant, because the occasion was legal, and the legal does not warrant smiling. And yet the smiling was happening, and the happening was beyond Palmer's control, because the control required understanding, and Palmer did not understand why he was smiling. That evening at the sawmill, he sat on the porch of his cabin with a cup of coffee that went cold because he forgot to drink it, and the forgetting was new. Palmer did not forget things. Palmer was precise and methodical and attentive to details, and yet the coffee was cold, and the coldness was the evidence of distraction, and the distraction was Nettie Walsh, whose signature was next to his signature on a form at the county courthouse, whose hand had been steady when she signed, whose eyes had been clear and direct and certain. And the certainty was the thing Palmer kept remembering, not the ceremony, not the clerk, not the form. The certainty in her eyes when she picked up the pen, and the certainty said that she was a woman who made decisions and did not unmake them, and the not unmaking was the quality Palmer admired most, because it was the quality he recognized in himself. He understood later. He understood later that the smiling was the body's recognition of something the mind had not yet processed, which was that the signature was not just a signature. The signature was a beginning, and beginnings produce smiling the way seeds produce flowers, automatically, inevitably, the growth programmed into the thing from the moment the thing begins. He rode back to the sawmill. He rode back smiling. The smiling lasted the entire ride, 12 miles through the valley, the horse walking, the man smiling, the valley green and bright and full of the particular possibility that Montana provides, which is the possibility of space, and space is the thing that allows growth, and growth was happening. Nettie moved into Owen's cabin. Palmer stayed at the sawmill. The arrangement was the arrangement, separate lives, connected by a signature. The signature the only bridge between the sawmill on the Blackfoot and the homestead in the Deer Lodge Valley. Except Palmer came to check on the cabin. He came because the cabin needed checking. The roof had a soft spot. The door frame was swollen from winter moisture. The porch step was cracked, and the checking was the excuse. And the excuse was transparent, and the transparency was the honesty, because a man who rides 12 miles to check a door frame is not checking a door frame. He fixed the roof. He fixed the door frame. He replaced the porch step. He did the work the way he did all work, thoroughly, with the precision of a sawmill operator who understands that straight cuts produce solid structures, and solid structures endure. And endurance was the thing Palmer was building, not the roof, the relationship. And the relationship was being built one repair at a time, the way houses are built one board at a time. On the third visit, Nettie had coffee ready. The coffee was hot and strong, and waiting on the porch rail when Palmer arrived. And the waiting was the evidence. Evidence that she had heard his horse on the road. Evidence that she had anticipated his arrival. Evidence that the anticipation was not unwelcome but expected. And expected is the first step toward wanted. And wanted is the first step toward needed. And the steps were being taken by both of them without either of them naming the steps or acknowledging that the walking was happening. He stayed for supper that night. Nettie cooked salt pork and beans and cornbread, the meal simple and filling, and shared across a table that Owen had built. And the sharing was the intimacy, not the food, but the sitting across from another person that is the foundation of every relationship. The daily proximity that turns strangers into companions, and companions into something more. And the something more was the thing that was growing between them the way grass grows in the valley, slowly, steadily, greenly, fed by the particular sunlight of proximity and the particular rain of repeated kindness. Nettie watched him work. She watched the way a person watches someone who is doing something unnecessary for reasons that are not stated. And the not stating was the mystery, and the mystery was the attraction, because attraction is often the result of unstated reasons, the reasons that exist beneath the surface, the way foundations exist beneath a house, invisible but essential. "You are smiling again," Nettie said. She said it on his fourth visit, standing in the doorway of the cabin while Palmer replaced a window pane that had cracked in the cold. "I am aware that I am smiling. You said the marriage was only a signature. The marriage is only a signature. The smiling is separate from the marriage. The smiling is a condition that developed after the signature, And the developing is not something I planned or controlled or understood. And the not understanding is the reason I keep coming to fix things. Because fixing things is the thing I understand. And understanding one thing while not understanding another thing is the human condition. And the human condition is the reason people smile at things they cannot explain. You have fixed the roof and the door and the porch and now the window. What will you fix next? Whatever breaks. If nothing breaks, I will find something that needs improving. If nothing needs improving, I will come anyway. And the coming anyway is the part I cannot explain. And the not explaining is the smiling. And the smiling is the truth. Nettie smiled. The smiling was the first time she had smiled since Owen died. And the first time was the evidence that the signature had done more than save the land. The signature had saved the smile. And the smile had saved the smiling. And the smiling was mutual now. Two people standing in a doorway on a homestead in the Deer Lodge Valley, smiling at each other, because the smiling was the answer to a question neither of them had asked, which was, what happens when a signature becomes something more than a signature? The answer was, this. This happens. The smiling happens. The fixing happens. The 12-mile ride happens. The happening is the love, and the love began as a signature, and the signature was only ink on paper, and ink on paper became everything.